Hello, friends, kind strangers, assorted creatures. Welcome to the Demiurge Diaries. I've come to appreciate peer pressure in the same way that I appreciate nuclear power, as a tool that is both monumentally horrifying and far too useful to ever even dream of getting rid of. This segment isn't about climate disaster, except when it explicitly is. This segment is not about climate disaster, and if its contents somehow lessen your belief therein, go to therapy. Still, how serious are we to take claims of threat, perhaps even existential threat? Let's say someone who you think is really clever tells you about this thing within their field of expertise that's super fucking dangerous to all of us. You're no expert. How seriously do you take it? If a really clever biochemist says that a certain compound is likely to kill you in the absence of broader academic awareness, do you avoid it? Do you tell your friends to avoid it? What if the proposed safety condition is a really big sacrifice? You probably know about Pascal's wager, the argument that any reasonable agnostic should at least act as though they believed in God, because the reward of heaven is so infinitely great that even the tiniest possibility of its reality means that you should take the bet. Making sacrifices to avoid uncertain doom is in some way similar to Pascal's mugging, a version of this dilemma which does not involve infinities. There's no way you can claim that the possibility of a catastrophic risk is zero, so there must be some degree of badness at which you should heed the warning even if you believe it's terrifically unlikely. Betting $1 on 1 in 1,000 odds of winning $1 million is the right thing to do, even if you don't think you'll win. You'd be an idiot not to. And don't even try to tell me you just read all the material on it and make up your own mind, either. There isn't enough time in your life to become an expert on everything anyone considers dangerous. Maybe you can pick up a few research projects as a hobby, but this cannot be your standard approach. You take the leap of faith or you don't. You believe in climate change, don't you? Good. Chances are that you are not a climate expert, and I don't mean that you don't have a diploma. You've probably read a bunch of articles, watched a bunch of videos, had discussions, had some lessons as part of your school curriculum. You do understand some links and mechanisms, but if you were dropped off in a world where no one knows about climate change, it is staggeringly unlikely that you could make quantitative predictions of your own, rather than citing quantitative predictions you remember from this world. One might argue that this is a smaller jump to make, but in the end you are still believing and acting not because of your own knowledge, but because of trust. If you were one of the people in that world where no one knows about climate change, and someone showed up with the amount of knowledge you have currently, attempting to convince you, would you believe them? I don't know if I would. Just feels like if this were true, then a lot more people would be saying it, you know? This isn't about climate change, this is about monkey brains. You know what the biggest predictor of people wearing masks during COVID was? It wasn't education, it wasn't socioeconomic status, it wasn't how many people around you died, it wasn't how informed you were, it wasn't even how scared you were. The most relevant factor was how many people around you wore masks. That's it. Click. Run. Peer pressure, or social proof, as Professor Robert B. Cialdini calls it. Take a second to despair, maybe mix it with some woefully misguided feeling of haughty exceptionalism as you remember instances of yourself swimming against the stream and misunderstanding those as immunity. And now, come back. Breathe in, out, and rejoice at this wonderful tool we have, because we cannot all be climate experts, we cannot all be virologists, and we cannot all be nuclear safety experts, but we can trust, and we can propagate that which is true and that which is obvious, not through lectures, but by example. Wear a mask and others will follow. Thank God for the monkey brain. Just imagine how many more would have died if people needed an in-depth understanding of medicine, virology, biochemistry before they would get vaccinated. Believe me, this argument feels terrible, because consensus is very easy to manufacture. A bad belief can enter a feedback loop of consensus once it reaches that status. Look at neoliberal economics. Nya? The best marker restaurants can affix to a dish if they want to sell more of it is most popular. The original claim of consensus doesn't even have to be true. You can hire actors or doctor Wikipedia pages, and the more power and capital you have, the easier, and your baseless assertion will be pulled into actuality without much effort. We are sheep. This is an unfathomable amount of cultural power, and you are not immune to propaganda. When you're telling people to believe anything at all, you're asking them to take leaps of faith. Never forget that. Why are you willing to take the leap? Is it group pressure? We can't all be nuclear safety experts, but we should all believe that there should be nuclear safety experts taking care of the nuclear safety. People are very, very stupid. All fibers of my being resist that belief because I love people. All I've ever been is people. But the data doesn't lie, and rational argument seems to be nowhere close to the best way of convincing us. I want the world to be good, so I will use powerful tools which I find unpalatable. Ignorance is not a virtue. My best friend strongly dislikes protests because he thinks that chants are far too viral. People don't chant along because they have a firm grasp of the nuances. They chant because others are doing it. This seems to him a reduction of politics to a spectacle, and I agree, but the spectacle is a tool and others will not stop using it because we feel ourselves above it. There is no alternative world in which we all become political scientists. We cannot all be political scientists. The breadth of human knowledge has made impossible the figure of the true polymath, let alone a society of them. Specialization is necessary. Pretending this isn't the case is venerating ignorance. So look at what is obviously true and start the chant. Back to the one very smart person talking about catastrophic danger, and remember, the only difference between them and someone warning of climate disaster is peer pressure, for all you know. Should you believe them? Should you act like you believe them so others will follow suit, maybe even sincerely? Even if you think you should, can you? On an emotional level, I mean. I don't have an answer to this, but I don't want to be the guy who dies because they were waiting for more people to get worried. I don't want to be the guy who joins every single doomsday cult either. What I certainly won't do is pretend like being an enlightened expert on everything is an option. Do you know how many things people are worried about? How many substances and policies, cultural trends, ecological feedback loops, prophecies, asteroids, mutations, conflicts, programs? Even just a day spent on each is impossible. Your choice on which ones you humor with cursory research is already no more than an indicator of how willing you were to take the leap from the start. There's a massive selection bias before rational consideration ever clicks in, and that's unavoidable because the world is too big and our prefrontal cortexes too small to ever know shit about anything. Most consent is uninformed, or at least not meaningfully informed. Islands of precarious maybe in sight, amidst a void of stuff we haven't even thought to look at. But for now, there's nothing we can do about the monkey brain. Best we can do is stop pretending like we aren't working with woefully insufficient tools. By what mechanism did you select the topics you chose to mindfully examine? Can't have been mindful examination. Tread carefully. There's psyops just beneath the surface.